versus wild collected corals, where corals grow in greenhouses with natural sunlight as a primary illumination. For the most engaging way, you want to maintain similar water chemistry as your favorite supplier, like alkalinity.
Hello. I need one of those right there. So my lazy ass can mow.
We gotta look at plants.
I know. Alright, we got some things. Stay tuned. Alright, what's up YouTubers? This is Chris here at Poseidon's Garden. Alright, it's episode 3. Wow. I can't believe we're still doing this. I'm just kidding. This is actually kind of fun. We're going to talk about the tank move today. Awesome, right? No, it sucked. Because we had to do 3 of them. And it's actually like a 2-week project that we've been going under here. So let's talk a little bit about it. What the heck? Why did we move our tank? Well, do you want the short story? No, you probably want the long story because you're watching the video. So, anyway. Mainly, it had to do with the fact that they were actually in our room. It was a little awkward at times to be having a bunch of people come back to our room to look at the tanks, because once a lot of people found out we had these tanks, and, you know, we started showing people these tanks, more and more people just felt like they needed to go look at them as they come around. And we felt like that really wasn't exactly a practical scenario to constantly have people going back to our bedroom to look at these tanks, especially when we have other people over, and for the most part we're hanging out in our living room, you know, socializing, playing games, playing Cards Against Humanity, you know, like people in our 20s usually do. Actually, we play more Uno than anything, because that's how you destroy friendships. But that wasn't the only factor in deciding to move our tank. Another one had to do with the fact that, you know, Becca gets woke up at the ass crack of dawn by me, usually, as it is, but it definitely doesn't help the fact that my tanks also aid in that effort. You know, it doesn't bother me because I am usually either up right when the lights come on, or I am up before my lights come on. Which isn't a bad thing. It's not like we're getting blasted with full light exposure right in the morning, but, you know, when 3 different tanks' lights first initially come on, even though it might only be a couple LEDs per tank, it's still pretty dang bright, so it's almost like we're getting hit with floodlights. It's like, hello, and God said, let there be light, kind of scenario. But, you know, it wasn't that bad. I didn't seem to mind it. Becca seemed to mind it. And it's better to keep your women happy, because if they're happy, then you're happy, and, you know, we can all live together in peace. You know, and it just seemed a little more practical to have all of our tanks out in the front room where people are usually hanging out, so that they can view them a little bit easier. You also can see the big one mainly from the front yard. And I've seen the neighbor kids looking at it a couple times, which is perfectly fine. I mean, if they wanted to come over and check them out, I'd be more than welcome to let them come check them out, as long as their parents are cool with it. You know, it's just cool and interesting to see that, you know, kids are even kind of like struck, like, wow, that's cool. Because, you know, at the end of the day, this is here to educate people and to expose people to the hobby and to reefing and the corals and what they even are. I mean, shoot, before I even got the hobby, I really didn't actually understand corals and what they were. I didn't realize that they're animals. I just, you know, they're a plant, but they're animals. They're actually more an animal than anything else. They're an animal that photosynthesizes, which is cool as shit. It's a plant, basically, living inside of an animal. We can talk a little more in depth about that on another day, but, you know, that's really cool. So these tanks are here to kind of educate people, so it's nice to have them in a little bit easier of access area. Plus, you know, there are plans to do future big things with these tanks, and it's just a little bit easier to do them when they're not in your room. And you have a lot more space to work with. Usually when you move your tanks, you really actually just shouldn't do it. You should really set these things up in the place that you plan to keep them in as a permanent basis, because the key with this hobby is stability, as anyone that's in the hobby would know. And those of you that are getting into the hobby are finding out that stability is the number one determining factor in your success. If your tank is not stable and it's constantly having, salinity swings, alk swings, calc swings, pH swings, just anything, like it's not going to be good for your tank, and your corals are going to suffer and they're not going to thrive. Especially your SPS coral, those are some of the hardest to keep. They more than likely will be the first to die. And then you'll see your LPS go, and eventually your softies. You probably will never see your mushrooms die, because it's almost impossible to kill mushrooms. If you're killing your mushrooms, you really are doing something wrong. Let's just that be known. But you really want to try your best to leave these things in place as much as you can, so that the stability is not going to be something you're worrying about. But that said, but generally speaking, when you do decide that you need to move them, if you do, you usually don't have a whole lot of time to do the move itself. So you really need to take your time planning this out, looking, at where you're planning on moving it. Is it going to be able to support the weight? If it's not going to be able to support the weight, you need to look into how you're going to, support that weight. Do you need to go downstairs and put some braces in place, or do you need to crawl underneath your house and put some cinder blocks down with some little, braces themselves? Or do you need to just look into moving it somewhere different? You might have to put it in your basement on your foundation itself. There's a lot of things that need to be taken into account. Your lights, how are you going to mount your lights? Okay, you're going to put them in drywall. Well, what are you going to do to anchor them to the drywall? Hi, Jocko, I'm recording, buddy. But what are you going to do to anchor them to your wall? And you need to make sure that those anchors are going to actually be able to support your weight, because if you just put those little cheap push-in drywall anchors for your screws, it's going to rip out. That stand is immediately going to rip out of the wall the second you put any weight on it. Or God forbid there's a shake, you have an earthquake, or anything that causes that light to wiggle a little bit or bounce, it could go. And you definitely don't want to accidentally have your extremely expensive light fixture fall into your tank and electrocute your tank, or even just cause debris to fall into your tank. You really don't want in there, because let's be honest, sheetrock is probably not the best thing to have fall into your reef tank. I have not had that happen. I am thankful, and I've never planned to have that happen, but should that happen, I guess I will document it and let you guys know what happened there. But we should never really have to get into that. But once you decide that you've got all that stuff figured out, your power figured out, protecting the area that you're planning on doing, putting your tank from salt creep and potential wear and tear, pretty much once you got that all figured out and you're ready, today's the day you're moving the tank. Right on. Have people there with you. Get your friends to come over. Cook them food. Do something to entice them to come help you, because if you tell them how much of a pain in the butt it's going to be, they're probably not going to want to help you, so you really need to entice them. I like to be honest with my friends when I ask them to help me with these kind of things. They already kind of know about how I am about my tanks and how particular I am. So, I didn't have to really woo them too hard, but it was nice that we had them come help us out. But you definitely need to have some people there to help you with the move, because doing it by yourself is it's just not a task you really want to try to do. I would not recommend it. So make sure you have some buddies there to help you. And you need to do it fast. But not too fast. You don't want to rush through it and mess things up. You need to take your time while you do it. But you need to do it quick, because your corals cannot be exposed to air for very long. They could probably maximum handle up to about 30 minutes being exposed, in my opinion. I grew up around the oceans, and I remember going to tide pools and seeing these corals and anemones and everything exposed to air for really long periods of time, hours at times, and it didn't seem to affect them illy too much. However, your corals in your aquarium are not constantly being subjected to tides, and that they're not being exposed to air like that. They're not constantly having fresh water dumped on them like crazy. They're not being exposed to chemicals and toxins getting into their water, directly on them. So these are not conditions that you really can use as a scenario to base things off of when you're moving your tank. You need to get done quick. 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes maximum. You want to get it done as soon as possible, so the more people you have draining the water, the more ways you have to get all that water out and move to the area that you're going to be re-putting it into the tank is the best. Once you get that water out of the tank, you need to move that tank ASAP. We were fortunate enough, we drained our sump first and got our sump completely unhooked and pulled out, and we moved that to the living room and had it already ready to go. It was sitting in the living room waiting for us to put our tank and stand in place so that we could just slide it in. And that's what we did. We literally got everything drained out. All four of us went in there and we picked up the tank, walked to the living room very carefully. We had to set it down a few times just to make sure we didn't bump or wiggle anything, because we ended up leaving all the sand and our live rock in there because we had like 90 pounds of live rock, and it was just easier to leave it and not try and dig with it because everything was epoxied together and all of our corals were epoxied to the rock. The only one that had not been epoxied was our clam. We ended up taking him out and we got the tank to about halfway, and we threw him in a bucket of water, threw him in the living room, and he loved it. He didn't seem to mind. He was open, happy as a clam, as they say, the whole time. We didn't have any issues with air getting him. We didn't have to burp him. He's been open and happy ever since he's been back in the tank. But you really need to be consciously aware of the amount of time you have here, and you don't have a whole lot, so you really need to be on it. You need to be doing this quick. You need to make sure you have everything. You have your checklist ready to go. You need to make sure you have everything ready to go. I cannot stress that enough. You do not want to be caught with your pants down while you're doing this. Especially when you're dealing with thousands of dollars. It's just not something you need to play games with. So take haste. Don't waste any time. Try to not make any mistakes if possible, because you will pay for them dearly. There's not really much else I can tell you about moving the tank other than try not to if you can help it. You want to make sure you leave these things in place. Stability's key. I can't speak enough about it. The more stable your tank is, the higher success rate you're going to have. The more your corals are going to flourish and they're going to grow. Or they won't, and they'll die. And you'll be wondering, what the heck? What am I doing wrong? Why are we having all these problems? Stability. If your tank's not stable, and you're constantly messing with it and changing things, your tank's going to hate you. Alright, like, comment, subscribe. We'll see you next week, guys.